A homeless man sat on the cold sidewalk, his daughter shivering in his arms. Hunger gnawed at them, but hope was fading. Desperate, he called out to passing strangers. "Please, do you have any spare change? Just enough for a meal?" Most ignored him, some spared him a glance, but no one stopped, until one man did. A well-dressed stranger, his face unreadable, pulled out a $10 bill and placed it in the homeless man's trembling hands. "Get yourself something to eat," he said before walking away. Relief flooded the man's heart. Finally, he could get a warm meal for himself and his daughter. But as he stepped inside a small restaurant, he saw something that made him freeze. Just ahead of him in line, a pregnant woman clutched her toddler's hand, her voice shaking as she pleaded with the cashier. "Please, I just need a little help. My card isn't working." The homeless man looked down at the only money he had. It wasn't much, but it was everything to him. And yet, without hesitation, he reached forward and did something that no one expected. What happened next would change his life forever. Before we reveal the shocking twist, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe for more heartwarming stories, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an inspiring tale. And tell us in the comments, would you give away your last $10 to help someone in need? Now, let's see what happened next. The cold wind howled through the streets as the homeless man clutched his daughter closer, shielding her from the bitter night air. His worn-out coat barely provided any warmth, and his stomach ached from days of hunger. He had been homeless for months, forced onto the streets after losing his job and being unable to pay rent. His wife, his daughter's mother, had passed away years ago, leaving him to raise their little girl alone. He had tried everything: shelters, odd jobs, even collecting scraps, but life had been unforgiving. Every day was a battle, and tonight was no different. As he sat on the corner of the busy street, his voice cracked with exhaustion as he asked passers-by for help. "Please, anything will do. My daughter hasn't eaten all day." Most people walked by without even looking at him. Some glanced his way before quickly turning their heads. Others scoffed, muttering things like, "Get a job," or "Stop begging." It wasn't the rejection that hurt. It was the way they looked through him, as if he didn't exist. Just as he was about to lose hope, a shadow loomed over him. He looked up to see a man in a tailored suit, his expression unreadable. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $10 bill. "Get yourself something to eat," the stranger said, placing the money in the homeless man's hands before walking away without another word. For the first time in what felt like forever, relief washed over him. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a meal. Enough to give his daughter a warm dinner, even if just for one night. With renewed hope, he picked up his daughter and made his way to a nearby restaurant. But just as he stepped inside, ready to order something to eat, his eyes locked onto a heartbreaking scene in front of him. A pregnant woman stood at the counter, holding the hand of a little girl who couldn't have been more than 3 years old. Her face was pale with worry, and her voice shook as she pleaded with the cashier. "Please, I just need a little help. My card isn't working, and I don't have enough cash with me." The cashier hesitated, looking at the long line of impatient customers behind her. The woman's child clung to her leg, staring up with wide, innocent eyes. The homeless man's grip tightened on the $10 bill. His stomach growled, reminding him of how hungry he was. His daughter tugged at his sleeve, whispering, "Daddy, I'm so hungry." He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. He had been ignored all day, treated as if he were invisible. Yet here was someone else, struggling, desperate just as he was. And in that moment, he knew what he had to do. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, stretched out his hand, and placed the only money he had onto the counter. "Here," he said softly. "This should cover your meal." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "No, I can't accept this. You need it too. Your little girl needs it more," he said with a kind smile. The cashier hesitated for a moment before taking the bill, processing the order, and handing the woman her food. The woman wiped away her tears, gripping the bag of food as if it were the most precious thing in the world. She turned to the homeless man. "I don't even know how to thank you." He simply nodded, his heart full despite his empty stomach. Little did he know, his simple act of kindness had been witnessed, and it was about to change his life forever. Stay tuned, because what happens next will leave you speechless. As the pregnant woman clutched the bag of food, tears welled in her eyes. She glanced back at the homeless man, her lips trembling as she tried to form words, but the emotion was too overwhelming. "Why did you do that?" she finally whispered. The man simply smiled, though hunger gnawed at his stomach. "Because I know what it feels like to have nothing." His daughter tugged at his sleeve, confused. "Daddy, what about our food?" He knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Not tonight, sweetheart. But don't worry, we'll be okay." He didn't regret his decision. Not for a second. The woman hesitated for a moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small card. "Please, if you ever need anything, call this number." The homeless man nodded, but tucked the card away without looking. He had been offered false hope before. People who made promises but never followed through. He wasn't expecting anything. As he and his daughter stepped back into the cold night, he had no idea that this one act of kindness had set something in motion. Something bigger than he could ever imagine. Because what he didn't know was that the man who had given him the $10 was the husband of that woman. The homeless man and his daughter walked away from the restaurant, their stomachs still empty, but their hearts full. He had made peace with his decision. Some might call it foolish, giving away the only money he had, but he didn't see it that way. He had spent months on the streets, struggling, suffering. If he could ease someone else's burden, even just for a moment, then it was worth it. But what he didn't know was that his life was about to take an unbelievable turn. Back at a high-rise office building, the well-dressed man, the one who had given the homeless man the $10 bill, sat in his private study, lost in thought. His name was William Carter, a billionaire entrepreneur who owned several businesses across the country. But tonight, none of that mattered. His mind replayed the scene from earlier, the moment he saw the homeless man hand over his last bit of money to his pregnant wife, Olivia. William had left the restaurant before Olivia got home. When she walked into their penthouse later that night, she immediately told him what had happened. "Will, I met the kindest man today." He looked up from his desk, intrigued. "What do you mean?" She placed her purse down, shaking her head in disbelief. "I was short on money at the restaurant. My card declined, and I was embarrassed. People were staring. Then out of nowhere, this homeless man handed me the only money he had." William's heart pounded. What did he look like? She described him, the worn-out jacket, the little girl clutching his side, the tired but kind eyes. It was him, the same man William had given money to earlier, the same man he had been curious about, wondering if he'd use the money for himself or for someone else. William stood up, running a hand through his hair. He had spent years building his fortune, meeting thousands of people, making tough business deals. But in that single moment, something shifted inside him. This man, who had nothing, had chosen to give rather than take. And that was something William Carter couldn't ignore. Determined, William grabbed his coat and keys. "Where are you going?" Olivia asked. "I need to find him." He didn't know why he felt so compelled to do this, but he knew one thing. This homeless man deserved more than just a simple thank you. William got into his car and drove through the streets, retracing the path where he had first seen the man. The city was alive with lights, people moving in and out of stores, but his focus was sharp. Then, finally, he saw them. The homeless man and his daughter were curled up on a park bench, trying to stay warm under a thin blanket. The sight of the little girl, nestled against her father's chest, her tiny hands gripping his coat, hit William hard. He stepped out of the car and walked toward them. The homeless man, half asleep, sensed someone approaching and instinctively pulled his daughter closer. "I'm sorry, sir," he mumbled. "We aren't bothering anyone. We'll leave if we have to." William shook his head. No, that's not why I'm here." The man looked up, eyes squinting in the dim light. His expression turned to shock as he recognized William, the same stranger who had given him the $10 bill earlier that day. "You?" the homeless man whispered. William crouched down to his level. "I saw what you did today. I saw you give away the only money you had to my wife." The homeless man's eyes widened. "She was your wife?" William nodded. "Yes, and you could have used that money for yourself, for your daughter, but you didn't. You helped someone else instead. Why?" The homeless man sighed, glancing at his sleeping daughter. Because I know what it feels like to be desperate. To feel like the world has turned its back on you. And if I can stop someone else from feeling that, even for a moment, then it's worth it. William's throat tightened. He had seen many things in his life: greed, selfishness, deception. But this man was different, and in that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. You and your daughter don't belong out here, William said firmly. I want to help you, but not just with money. The homeless man looked at him cautiously. What do you mean? William took a deep breath. Come with me. My wife and I have extra space in our home. And he hesitated, then smiled. We could really use someone to help look after our daughter. You'd have a roof over your head, food on the table, and a chance to get back on your feet. The homeless man's eyes filled with tears. He had been ignored, rejected, and pushed aside by society for so long. And now, someone was offering him a chance at a new life. He looked down at his sleeping daughter and then back up at William. And with a trembling voice, he finally said, Yes, I'll come with you. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a brand new chapter, one he never thought was possible. The homeless man, Daniel, could barely believe what he had just agreed to. For months, he had fought to survive, believing that no one in the world cared about him or his daughter. And now, a billionaire, William Carter, was offering him not just money, but a second chance at life. As they drove through the city, Daniel glanced at his daughter, who was still asleep in his arms, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. For the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't in years: hope. When they arrived at William's house, Daniel was stunned. It wasn't just a house, it was a mansion. A place so big and beautiful that he had only seen homes like this in magazines. He hesitated at the doorstep, suddenly feeling out of place. Are you sure about this? He asked, his voice uncertain. William nodded. I don't offer things I don't mean, Daniel. You gave away the only money you had to help my wife. It's time someone helps you. At that moment, William's wife, Olivia, appeared in the doorway, holding their young daughter. Her eyes softened when she saw Daniel. Thank you, she said, her voice filled with emotion. I don't know what would have happened today if you hadn't helped me. Daniel shook his head. You don't need to thank me. Olivia smiled. Maybe not. But that doesn't mean we won't help you in return. She turned to William. I think he should stay with us. We have more than enough space, and I could use some extra help with our daughter. Daniel's heart pounded. Could this really be happening? You trust me with that? He asked. Olivia nodded. You helped my daughter before you even knew who we were. I know you're a good man. Daniel looked down at his own daughter, still peacefully asleep, unaware that her life was about to change forever. He took a deep breath and finally said, I won't let you down. For the first time in years, he walked through a front door, not as an outsider, not as someone looking for a handout, but as a man given a new beginning. Daniel's story is proof that kindness is never wasted. A single selfless act, a moment of pure generosity, led to a life-changing opportunity, one he never could have imagined. He didn't help Olivia because he expected something in return. He did it because it was the right thing to do. And in the end, that one choice, choosing to help despite having nothing himself, gave him everything he had been missing: stability, a home, and a future for his daughter. William and Olivia didn't just change Daniel's life. Daniel changed theirs too. He reminded them that real wealth isn't measured in money, but in compassion, integrity, and the ability to lift others up when they need it most. And so, the man who once sat hungry on the streets, ignored by the world, found himself in a home filled with warmth, love, and a second chance at happiness, all because he gave away his last $10 to someone in need. What would you do? If this story touched your heart, smash that like button, subscribe for more inspiring stories, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a powerful tale like this. And tell us in the comments, would you have given away your last $10 to help a stranger? Let's see how many kind souls are out there. Because at the end of the day, kindness always comes back to you.